Thank you for joining us. Let's begin with our webinar. I'm very pleased that you join today with us. Welcome to our webinar. Today we will talk about the data analytics, how these analytics are collected, how they are used to improve policing, and how this information is useful to prevent crime and to save lives. I'm very happy that you are today with us. We will offer in this month a series of webinars. In this first session, we will talk about collection of data for policing. We will offer a series of presentations that will be very interesting for you, which show some cases that was very important in this region because in this today, police is using data analytics to improve their work. Now statistics is a useful tool to improve policing. And today we will see three presentations, very good presentation. First, the National Colombian Police will talk to us. They work with Interpol, and then the policy from Honduras will talk, and we'll finish. The UN will finish with the third presentation from the drug department. We will talk today in Spanish and English. I would like to see some topics that we already talked about in the past, just for background. You can join in English or Spanish. You can select the language, the better for you. This session also is recorded, and you can, after join and retrieve it, you can share with us your questions, and our panelists will answer for you. I'd like to thank and to acknowledge the work of our colleagues from the International Office for Fight Against Drugs in the USA. They have helped us very much to carry out this webinar for you. Thank you very much. We have collaborated with them a lot. So let's begin. I would like to introduce to you, please, the National Colombian Police to turn on your camera. And I'd like to introduce Lieutenant Colonel Juan Carlos, who is in the Department of Criminal Investigation of Colombia. And we are very happy he's here today with us. Please, the voice is yours. You have 20 minutes. Good morning, everyone who is today with us. As the introduction, I am Lieutenant Colonel Juan Carlos Sierra. I work in the Colombian National Police And I have been commissioned from our superior authorities from the Criminal Investigation Department to talk today with you and to share our ideas and our work with you, because this is a very, very important topic. I am the head of all the departments and forces that deal with criminal investigation in Colombia. And I also coordinate the human rights of the persons who are under arrest, and also coordinate the data collection and also the online resources to get connection and to be connected. I am the link between all the authorities and governmental agencies in order to share information. And we also do field work. My work is very, very comprehensive. So I'd like to present the QUAIC. This is the component of administration for information. This component comes from internal policies, which we use for internal policy guidelines. As you can see in this screen, all these function as the structure. This makes structure for our policy, which is in charge of investigating all crimes, not only in Colombia, but also crimes that go beyond our boundaries. As you can see in this screen, we have a general manager, the general, then we have the assistant director, who is a colonel, and we work pursuant to some laws. We have a legal framework that rules our work, and we are very close to the General Prosecutor's Office. And for our work, we use the database that are a little different from the database used by the intelligence agencies. Inside our legal framework, we have some rules for the database that we use. That's why they are a little different, because some data are very sensitive and should be administered only by the police departments. These data that are managed only by police department have very strict protocols to ensure that only authorized persons use this data, because they are very, very sensitive, and we have to avoid leaks.
Centralizados en Bogotá y descentralizados en todo el nivel.
We have 14,000 people working in our department today in the whole country in Colombia. So this is a very, very huge team that works to fight crime. We are from the local communities and provincial communities and in the whole country, in all levels of the government. So we get involved in criminal investigations. We have three elements in our work. The first one is the centralized component. That means all the manage of all material that may become an evidence in the investigations, and then come other areas which assess judicially to police departments and in the current investigations. In this webinar, we will talk about the element that we use. Sorry, there is some bad sound. It's bad sound, I can understand. This component we use is a component that allows us to carry out judicial investigations. Is used by police departments and involves statistics, data analytics, and all the quantitative numbers. For example, if we want to study or investigate a neighborhood, the analytics, the agents have to retrieve data from this neighborhood in order to get insight about the criminal behavior in such neighborhood. When the agents analyze all this data, have to create a response that makes sense in order to solve this criminal behavior. And we assess in all this work. And we have other area that carries out criminal analysis. This tool allows us to identify perpetrators and criminal structures, and all this information we get from the data. And forward, we will talk about this in detail. We have created a mega structure for criminal investigation, which is managed by Bogota, which is the capital of Colombia. And I, because of my work and my position, have access to this data. There must be only authorized person who use this data. So we use, the authorized persons use this information to create strategies for crime fighting. I like to share this screen. We have, our QAIC is divided into three sectors. ARAIC is an organized data system which is used by judge, attorneys, prosecutors, policy departments. We share this data. For example, it includes warrant orders, sentences in the first or second instance, which gun was used in the crime. For example, who was the perpetrator, what kind of structure in the crime. If they have been processed or not. We had the statistics from all the agencies, from the smallest one to the biggest one. So from this we have created a very strong system to manage this big data at national level. We have 3 systems, SIOPER, MACRI, and CIETCO. These systems are delivered in Java because Java is a system that is compatible with almost all platforms, and through Java, the data may be shared.
La base de datos. ¿Alguna pregunta? Qué pena.
Una disculpa, parece que el canal de interpretación se mezcló un poco.
Correcto. Entonces viene todo el sistema de información que tenemos nosotros, esos son nuestros sistemas de información. De ahí se desprenden otros, pero esos son los sistemas de información madre, para poder tener toda esa información organizada. La base de datos que se tiene para todos esos sistemas de información es Oracle. Oracle maneja el 100% de nuestras bases de información, que como ustedes ya saben en el marco técnico, eso es una empresa multinacional que maneja solamente bases de datos y donde hemos hecho digámosle que un tema de presupuestal muy fuerte para mantener nuestras bases de datos activas, evitando el tema de que de pronto puedan ser contaminadas o a través de delitos de información, porque la pérdida de esos datos sería fuerte en un momento dado para la policía y hasta para temas de seguridad nacional y de seguridad ciudadana. Entonces, esa base de nuestras bases de datos sí es completamente fuerte, con unos contratos pues que efectivamente solamente se manejan con esa empresa. Nuestro soporte a nuestros sistemas de información, como ustedes lo pueden ver ahí en el tema del SIOPEN y en el tema del MACRI, frente a lo que estamos haciendo, es que nuestros ingenieros fueron entrenados y capacitados por la misma empresa Oracle y son ingenieros de sistema que se dedican al desarrollo de estos mismos tipos de información. Y para el caso del CIETCO, que es toda la plataforma estadística que tenemos nosotros contratamos un tercero, que es una empresa que nos orienta a nosotros, que se llama Click y que hace representación aquí en Colombia con una multinacional. En el caso de poder que con la información del CIETCO estadística, esta empresa nos permite tener unos visualizadores donde la información nos le da una mejora en el diseño para que los jefes o el personal que no maneje la estadística puedan ser mejor orientados. Y basado en esto, estamos ahorita en estos momentos con toda esa información en data que pesa casi 5 petabytes. Entonces, si ustedes van y miran, dicen, venga, el SIOPER maneja todas las órdenes de captura vigentes, maneja todo lo que tiene que ver sentencias ejecutoriadas, o sea, toda la gente que está condenada en Colombia. En el MACRI manejamos todo lo que son actores y estructuras, y en el CIETCO tenemos todo lo que tiene que ver con el desarrollo de los delitos cometidos en Colombia y donde están mapeadas. Todas esas 3 bases de datos unidas crea nuestro modelo predictivo, creado por la policía, está en un lenguaje de Python y efectivamente ya está a puertas de salir a producción. Estamos orientados a ver en qué nivel de predicción tiene. Dígame que esa es la estructura del organigrama en temas de ingeniería de lo que manejamos nosotros en el grupo. Ahora bien, la
Un
data
segundito, por
criminal,
favor.
como ustedes pueden ver, tienen que tener claro es que esa data criminal tiene un peso jurídico. Ese peso jurídico quiere decir que en caso de que una persona insultas, estaría cometiendo un delito que está por el Código Penal colombiano. Estaría cometiendo un delito que aquí en Colombia se llama acceso abusivo a bases de datos. Entonces ustedes pueden ver que definitivamente estamos alineados a proteger la data, así sea una data criminal, así estamos hablando de un delincuente. No, la orden es que se proteja, que tengamos unos protocolos muy fuertes, que tengamos unos protocolos donde las personas puedan generar ese ambiente, de que no vayan a hacer perdida su información. Nos quedan 5 minuticos para terminar. Quería mostrarles este ciclo. Entonces, y eso que estamos hablando de pronto resumiendo a grandes rasgos, porque cada cosa necesita una intervención específica para poder explicar, venga, ¿y cuáles son los tipos de productos? ¿Cómo se sacan esos productos? ¿Hasta dónde llega el cliente de esos productos? ¿Cómo hacemos nosotros la evaluación de esos productos? O sea, cada cosa que les estoy mostrando, de pronto por el tiempo, es algo muy rápido para que podamos digerir. Pero antes de terminar, y en estos 5 minuticos que nos quedan, sí quiero hablarles del ciclo de la información criminológica que hace la Policía Nacional. Pues el ciclo, de todas maneras, con todos mis pares que están aquí conmigo y que definitivamente también podemos tener conexión, pues tenemos el ciclo normal. Entonces tenemos un tema de recolección, un tema de consolidación y un tema de tratamiento, difusión. Para el tema de recolección, como pueden ver ustedes, nosotros recolectamos desde el mismo caso que conocen la policía. Hay diferentes bases de datos, no solamente las bases de datos que le hemos mostrado a ustedes, sino que cada vez que pasa algo en la policía a nivel de vigilancia en cuadrantes, a nivel de dirección de carabineros, que son todas nuestras estructuras que están protegiendo estructura crítica de la nación, como temas de electricidad, de petróleo, todo eso, hay información, data que se recoge en el lugar de los hechos. Todo lo que tiene que ver con accidentes de tránsito, todo lo que tiene que ver, por ejemplo, en la DIAC con el tema de secuestro, todo lo que tiene que ver con las salas de denuncia, de la fiscalía y de la policía. Entonces, toda esa data, nosotros hemos entendido de que no la podemos perder. Toda la que le entregamos a la Fiscalía General de la Nación en el campo de contestar los peritazgos. Eso es un tema de recolección. Y ahí va mi primer punto sensible. Y es de que nosotros como policías tenemos mucha data que organizar para poder tener claridad de lo que está pasando en el territorio. Muchas veces dejamos pasar muchas cosas. Nuestros libros de población es una data que tenemos que entrar en un momento dado a sistematizar, porque estamos perdiendo mucha información. Después de tener esa recolección muy clara, pues pasamos a un tema de consolidación, que es formar claramente nuestras bases de datos y las herramientas tecnológicas para poder decir, venga, esa data hay unas situaciones muy fuertes en el tema hoy en día con el tema del ciberseguridad. Tenemos que tener esa data muy bien protegida. Si la Policía Nacional tiene, nuestras policías tienen la fuerza para soportar un ataque en ciberseguridad. Y ahí crear unos sistemas de información que desarrollen lo que habíamos hablado en recolección. Entonces, en esos sistemas de información tenemos que tener claridad de las variables que queremos analizar y en el desarrollo de las variables. Por último, tenemos el tratamiento de la información que se haga a través de personas especializadas. O sea, en el caso de la Policía Nacional Colombiana, la gente que ingresa al grupo dura lo que dure su carrera. Tenemos, por ejemplo, en el caso de nosotros, los capitanes han durado acá los 15 años de servicio, conocen, manejan, están ahorita en estos momentos orientados, tienen capacitación. Entonces, una persona que maneja tratamiento acá es una persona, un capitán que tiene 2 maestrías. que ha conocido el saber hacer de la gente, que conoce cuáles han sido nuestras falencias, que está pensando en mejorar el sistema para poder tener ese tema de tratamiento, para poder hacerle las mejoras que tenemos. De ahí partimos en el tema de lo que tiene que ver con, tenemos claro quiénes son nuestros clientes, para qué sirven nuestros productos y cuál ha sido el enfoque en el mejoramiento. No quiere decir que seamos perfectos, pero definitivamente los análisis que hemos tenido ya son, efectivamente, han dado un esfuerzo, ya hemos podido ayudar a tomar muy buenas decisiones. Elaboración de productos, manejamos una revista de criminalidad que la sacamos todos los años, le damos todo el ambiente. Yo creo que ahí ya completamos nuestros 20 minutos. Definitivamente es un tema apasionante, es un tema de lo que hoy mueve, lo dicen los libros, que es el nuevo petróleo en el mundo, que es la administración de los datos. Muchísimas gracias. Espero que les haya gustado rápidamente este bosquejo de nuestra unidad y para mí es un honor poder participar en este evento.
Le agradezco enormemente, teniente. De verdad ha sido bastante esclarecedor ver el proceso que siguen, ver de qué manera interactúan estas distintas bases de datos, estos distintos sistemas, pero sobre todo creo que un aspecto clave que está tocando es el tema del personal, del recurso humano. Le agradezco muchísimo que nos pueda compartir esta experiencia. Seguramente tendremos muchas dudas y seguimiento que hacer después de esta sesión. Para pasar al siguiente ponente, le pediría por favor a nuestro colega y aliado del Centro de Excelencia desde hace bastante tiempo, el señor Juan Carlos Velázquez, que por favor se una, pueda encender su cámara y micrófono. Él es demógrafo y especialista en análisis de datos sobre seguridad ciudadana en la Unidad Técnica de Coordinación Interinstitucional de la Policía de Honduras, UTESI. Le agradezco muchísimo que nos acompañe y desde luego será un gusto poder escuchar también esta presentación. Carlos, adelante, el micrófono es todo tuyo. Una disculpa, estoy viendo que parece que Carlos tuvo un pequeño problema de conexión, así que para aprovechar el tiempo, entonces pasaremos a nuestra siguiente presentación y esperando que Carlos...
So we're going to our next presentation, hoping that he can join.
En este caso, Martín,
Bueno.
te pediría a ti que por favor te puedas ir uniendo. Ah, no, ya veo a Carlos. Una disculpa, un segundo, por favor.
Sí,
Carlos.
estamos por acá conectados, solo tuvimos problemas con el internet.
Ah, perfecto. Muchas gracias. Entonces, adelante, por favor. El foro es todo tuyo.
Sí, buenos días.
Presentación, pero no se ve aún en modo pantalla completa.
Muy bien. ¿Sí se ve?
Se ve, me parece que lo podemos ver bien.
Hola,
Can you
buenas.
hear my screen? I think that you can hear me, right?
Adelante, por favor.
Sí, buenos días. En esta mañana estaremos hablando sobre el proceso y cómo estos datos también dan, pero a la vez que podamos identificar de qué forma se llega a poder trabajar con los datos.
We need to identify how we can work with data
Y otros datos del sistema estadístico seguridad del país. En esta ocasión, pues, vamos a hablar de la metodología y funcionamiento de la mesa de muerte biológica. ¿A qué nos referimos con esto? En Honduras se trabaja con diferentes fuentes de información para poder obtener un dato oficial de país. Principalmente violencia completo en toda la seguridad ciudadana. Para ese efecto, el Estado ha creado una unidad de coordinación internacional denominada UTESI. Esta funciona dentro de la Secretaría que la UTESI tiene una de sus funciones. Su propósito es crear esas prácticas en las cuales se trabajan indicadores que sean comparables a nivel, ¿verdad? A nivel de la región y que estos sean considerados dentro de la toma de decisiones. Son diferentes las instituciones con las cuales se trabajan y se llega a un consenso en cuanto
So
a...
we have different institutions and the way the information is used. So we have 14 institutions that we have been working with, and among them we have the National Police, which is the main source of information, and this is where we belong. This is the institution that we work in, and we have the Institute for the Registration of People, we have the National Institute of Statistics, we have the National Observatory for Violence, the Supreme Court of Justice, among other institutions. And among the array of things that we do in the office that we're working on, we have a criminality field where we talk about family violence, domestic violence, and violent deaths. So we are going to be working about this and we're going to be talking about this. We are going to be mentioning violent deaths. The working table is, we are talking about working with 7 different people, different types of elements. So what are these violent deaths that we can find in the country? We can validate different of them. Some of them are natural deaths, but we're always considering why natural death is considered here. To be able to determine the source of data, the first thing that we need to know is, for example, that in Honduras, we have the observatory and we consider the geography. We apologize, we're having some technical issues because we cannot listen to the speaker properly. Our apologies, apparently this person had some problems with the audio and with his connection, but I believe that we're going to have to go to our next panelist while he solves his technical issue. So Martin, can I ask you to start with your presentation? I'm going to do a very brief introduction. Martin Kind is a statistical expert and he is in the investigation and analysis of trends in the UNDC in the Office of the United Nations against drugs and crime, and he's going to talk about the most recent posts. And well, the reason for this webinar is this. So Martin, please, you have the floor. Please turn on your camera and you have 20 minutes for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. Let me quickly share my screen. I will be presenting in English, so just so everybody knows this. Can you just confirm that you can see my slides?
Sí, se ven bien y aprovecho la oportunidad para pedirle a todos nuestros
Yes,
asistentes.
we can see your screen, and please tell me the people that if you want to listen to the simultaneous interpretation, you have to turn this option on the screen.
Okay, thank you. So as Roberto said, my name is Martijn. I am a statistician with UNODC based in Vienna. And over the last year or so, I've been working on a project on the production of statistical data by criminal justice institutions, primarily based on the use of administrative data, which is, of course, the topic of today's webinar. So as we all know, administrative data is data that is collected by service providers in the course of their day-to-day business. And these data have become an increasingly important source of information for the production of official statistics. As was also just shown in the first presentation by the Lieutenant Colonel from Colombia, and as was shown in the second presentation briefly as well. Administrative data is, of course, quite different in nature from other data sources that could be used to generate statistics, such as surveys. And it offers a few unique advantages and challenges, both of which I'll briefly discuss today. Administrative data can provide highly detailed insights into the workings of the criminal justice system, and it offers a very rich data source for crime trends and policy evaluation, but also broader than just looking at the number of crimes that occur in a country. We can also look at other aspects of the functioning of the criminal justice system. And that is something that we're trying to do in this project. So there have been some long-term efforts to improve the use and the sharing of administrative data sources. And from UNODC side, this is mostly our most important contribution to date has been the release of the International Classification of Crime for Statistical Purposes, or the ICCS, back in 2015. I think most of you are familiar with the ICCS thanks to the good work by the CUE. So building on the ICCS, the work I'm going to present to you today aims to bring the data providers and producers of official crime and criminal justice statistics closer together and offer a way to extract more value out of a broader range of administrative data sources than just looking at offense data. So very briefly, why did we choose to focus on the use of administrative data? I'm just going to briefly talk about the advantages and the challenges associated with the data source. Like I said, it's something that is already being collected in a day-to-day operation of most criminal justice institutions. So it's a very available data source, and they can be leveraged for official statistical purposes. Some of the most important advantages associated with administrative data is that they are relatively cost-effective, particularly when you compare them to other data sources like censuses or surveys. However, it is, of course, important to acknowledge that collecting high-quality administrative data is not a cost-free exercise and does require a significant investment in IT systems, coordination mechanisms, and, of course, also human resources. The data itself is, however, typically available free of charge, so that is a great advantage as well. We also see that they are generally collected in real time or with minimal delay. So they can be made available more quickly, basically, and they are typically also more frequent than surveys or censuses, because of course a survey takes a long time to plan. You have to design a questionnaire, do the survey work, etc., etc. And by the time you can finally publish the results, the data is typically already a year or two old, whereas with administrative data, you can generate data in close to real time. There's, of course, also an advantage with administrative data in terms of coverage and detail. These kinds of data are typically collected under some sort of statutory, regulatory, or administrative provision, and it typically comprehensively covers a large population, typically the entire group of interest, which really enables very robust statistical findings using the data. The data are collected for specific administrative purposes, and they usually also can provide us with some very detailed information on specific events, but also data on victims, offenders, and also criminal justice processes, all of which allows for very in-depth analyses and insights if we use unique identifiers and individual records. Another advantage is that these data are typically collected on the longer term. So some administrative data sources go back multiple decades, allowing for the study of long-term trends and patterns in crime and criminal justice data. course, all of this also comes with some challenges. The main challenges, I would say, are a lack of standardization. This is probably the most important one. There need to be very strict rules and a standardized protocol to ensure that all involved actors are collecting the same kind of data, registering the same variables, using the same codes and the same response categories. And all agencies should, of course, also apply the same definitions. For example, when do we label an intentional homicide as femicide? What are the rules for that? What determines that? So of course, this is why metadata is also very important. There are other challenges, like the data quality can be an issue. So there can be some the administrative data are typically very comprehensive and highly detailed, but of course, they're not immune from human error. So we do see often that there are missing values or data entry mistakes or inconsistencies and poor reporting that can impact the quality of the data. There can also be some challenges related to data access, especially as was already indicated in the previous presentation as well, that these data can typically contain very sensitive and personally identifiable information. So it's very important to ensure the security of the data and that all actors are protecting the data and are following legal and ethical guidelines for the handling, storage, and sharing of data. Another challenge is that typically we're talking about legacy systems when we're reviewing administrative data. Not all countries are as advanced as Colombia, perhaps. Data recording systems may have been designed and implemented years or even decades ago, and these systems can have limited functionality or even lack compatibility with modern software standards, and could even rely on outdated or unsupported software or hardware. So addressing these challenges can be very costly, and to make the leap, to make the jump to a modern, flexible, and interoperable solution can be very challenging. And finally, I just want to highlight that it's not really a challenge; it's more of a limitation of administrative data, that they simply do not capture the dark figure of crime. So if you look at administrative data collected by the police, for example, is what we're focusing on today, we can only really know the patterns in the data that's collected by the police, i.e. crimes that are reported to the police in the first place. We don't really know what's happening in the country in terms of data that are not reported to the police. And as we know from crime victimization surveys, this number can be very significant. So why do we want to encourage the collection of more administrative data, and why do we want to standardize this? Well, there are generally four main purposes to this kind of data. Firstly, there's an operational purpose. So it's very good to have a standardized way of recording these kinds of offenses and having basic information available, like where did a specific crime happen, what was the sex and the age of the offender, the sex and the age of the victim, etc., so that we can better deal with specific crimes. On the managerial level, the data that these kinds of administrative data can also be very important to monitor the performance of criminal justice agencies and identify bottlenecks and devise solutions to overcome these bottlenecks. So, for example, we can look at the workload, we can look at staffing levels, we can see of the number of crimes that are reported and recorded by the police, how many of those crimes are actually successfully resolved. But you can also try to look at more specific questions, like what part of the budget is dedicated to preventing violence against women, and has increasing that budget had any effect at all? And if not, what can we do different? And this also links to the next point, that the data can actually be very relevant for research and policy development, because collecting a lot of administrative data is a fine exercise in and of itself, but of course the data are only valuable when they're actually used. So to enable their use and reuse, it's very important to consider the use of both internal and external users. And if you work with research institutes or this National Statistical Office, for example, the data can also be used to try to better understand trends and patterns, and formulate more evidence-based crime prevention policies. The fourth point that I want to highlight here is that it also has an accountability angle. So it allows us to try to enhance public trust. And if we use the administrative data to generate some statistics, it can inform the general public on the performance of the criminal justice system as a whole. Of course, there is also an international need for data. For example, the 2021 Kyoto Declaration reaffirms the global commitment to evidence-based crime prevention through the collection and analysis of data, keeping in mind the classification, the ICCS. And of course, these kinds of data are also a key component for monitoring progress on SDG 16. This includes targets on reducing violent crime, corruption, bribery, but also targets on the promotion of the rule of law and ensuring access to justice for all, and the development of effective, accountable, and transparent institutions. So all of this data we can collect, and it goes far beyond just looking at the homicide rate in the country. There are a lot of other factors that we can look at. So in this project, it's a broader project that really focuses on improving administrative data, not just in the police, but throughout the criminal justice sector. So at UNODC, we typically recognize 4 distinct phases in this process. Of course, there's a great deal of variety between member states in how in the kinds of powers that each of these individual institutions have, and there may be some overlap, and in some countries they may function slightly differently. But generally, in most countries, this is the general pattern that's followed in the criminal justice sector. So since we're focusing on the police today, the police is typically the first point of contact with official authorities, and they investigate allegations of criminal contact, gather evidence, and file charges. Of course, this is just focusing on very narrowly in criminal offenses. And like I said, we are looking at a slightly broader perspective. Of course, we're also developing guidelines for the other steps in the criminal justice sector, as I'll show you in the next slide. So this is what we're doing with the guidelines. We're hoping to offer a basic international framework that is relevant, feasible, and based on some of the international standards and norms that the UN has developed over the years. For the police, an important one, for example, is the Code of Conduct for law enforcement officials. And we hope to offer clear guidance on what data to collect and really link it as much as possible to the already existing ICCS. So in total, we're going to develop 3 guidelines for the specific institutions. So the one we'll mostly be talking about today is the guidelines for the police. Then there's also a guideline for prosecution and courts, and there will also be a guideline for the prison system. And these 3 really focus on what kind of variables countries can collect to really improve the transparency of their criminal justice system, and also the performance. And then there will be a 4th guideline that focuses more on the how. So how do you do this? How do you actually build a system of criminal justice statistics? What kind of things should we take into account? And again, just to emphasize, it goes far beyond just offense data. The guidelines really aim to systematize data collection on a range of activities that go way beyond offense data, and it includes data specifically for the police for on resource use, professional conduct of officers, the kinds of outreach activities that are done to build community relations, the use of force and firearms by police officers, etc. So I'll just leave this on the screen for a few seconds so you can use the QR codes to have a look yourself. Maybe we can also paste the link in the chat for both the English and the Spanish version of the guidelines. I'll just say that they're available now. The English version has been available for almost a year now, and now I think just a week or so ago, we also finally uploaded the Spanish version of the guidelines, so it's available now for you to use. I'll briefly talk about the framework that's contained in the guidelines. I will not go into depth about all the different variables that we're recommending in the guidelines, but suffice it to say that each of the dimensions that I'm highlighting here has a pretty long list of variables that we're saying that we're recommending countries collect. So it's divided into 4 thematic areas with a total of 12 dimensions. So the first thematic area is resources, where we ask countries, the police specifically, to collect data on human resources, financial resources, physical resources, and staff safety and well-being. When we look at crime statistics, it is indeed criminal offenses, which is also what we're already recommending in the ICCS, of course, but it's also data on arrests and detention and data on seizure operations that are performed by the police. This can be very important, as we'll see in an example in just a few slides. Some of the other activities, focus on stop and search activities, public assembly and outreach. And on the conduct thematic area, we focus on the use of force and firearms and professional conduct by police officers. So just to make it a little bit more practical, I would like to show you a quick example from the United Kingdom. This just shows you the number of incidents involving use of force tactics in the United Kingdom. And you can see for each incident which use of force tactic was applied. So we can simply see here that the most commonly used tactic is restraint, physical restraint. But we can also see how many times officers had to resort to the use of firearms, for example. And since the 1st of April 2017, the police in the UK is required to collect this kind of data, and it feeds into the work of the National Police Chiefs Council and the College of Policing, and it allows them to enhance tactics, training, and equipment in order to improve the safety of officers and people with whom they come into contact. Just as another quick example, this is an example from data that is applied to UNODC actually through our IDS platform, but it follows the structure of the seizures dimension that I just highlighted. So this is, like I said, data from Italy for the year 2021 on the kinds of individual drug seizures that were done in Italy. And these are significant seizures that were made in Italy of 1 kilogram or larger for the 3 most common types, which in this case is heroin, cat, and cocaine type drugs. And of course, when you collect this kind of information, you can also plot it on a map, as we've done here, and then you can really see what are some of the hotspots on the map. For example, here we can really see that the area around Milan and Napoli and some areas around Sicily really light up as important seizure points. So this is basically what I wanted to tell you about police guidelines, a very brief introduction. I really encourage you to have a look at the guidelines themselves and familiarize yourself with them. And I just also want to point out that we have just very recently launched the prosecution service and courts guidelines, which are currently only available in English, unfortunately, but we will try to translate those into Spanish as well as soon as possible. But if the language barrier is not an issue for you, I do encourage you to have a look at that as well. And just as a very quick example of what we're trying to collect here, it's again, we focus on resource data, but we also focus specifically on data collected by prosecution on criminal cases, pretrial detention, non-custodial measures, some data on extradition and mutual legal assistance, and of course also again on professional conduct. And then as a final thing, I just want to say that coming soon, there will be even more. So we are trying to finalize the guidelines for the production of statistical data by the prison system as we speak, which will draw heavily on the Nelson Mandela rules and the Bangkok rules, which are the international norms developed by the UN on the prison system, where we look at prisoner profiles, we look at reintegration efforts by the prison system, but also safety and security in the prison system. And of course, also again, conduct. So we look at the kinds of complaints that are submitted by prisoners, but also the use in force in prisons. And as I indicated initially as well, there will be a 4th guideline on the development of a system of criminal justice statistics, which will expand on the 2003 manual. Some of you may be familiar with it, but the UN released a manual back in 2003 on this topic. And we're trying to expand on that now and really try to explain the use of administrative data and provide guidance on data governance of criminal justice statistical system, including a discussion on the importance of leadership, regulation, coordination between institutions, and of course also data architecture, which is a very important part of it as well. That is all I have to say. I think that's roughly 20 minutes. So back to you, Roberto.
Thank you so much, Martin. That was a great way to introduce the police guidelines in Spanish now. Thank you very much for your time. I'm going to switch to Spanish now. A todos nuestros asistentes.
To all our attendees, I hope that this presentation was of your interest, and we're going to be sharing the link in the chat. It's already there, actually, to download these guidelines in Spanish, and we will be showing the QR codes again at the end of this session. I apologize for the connection problems that we've had along the day. Apparently Zoom is not being our best ally today, but I would like to go back to Juan Carlos to know if we can finalize that presentation. I hope that we can at least show a little bit more about the UTESI. So Juan Carlos, can you try again and turn on your microphone? Maybe not the screen so that you don't saturate um, your system. Yes, I'm going to share my screen. Give us 1 second. Now you can see the presentation, right? Yes, you're sharing your presentation. Please, if you could just do this presentation in 12 minutes, this is what we have left. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry. Well, talking about what I was mentioning before, we mentioned the use of data in the country and the effort that has been generated in terms of having quality of data and violence and criminality. And this is technical unit of interinstitutional coordination. And we are working on these tables: criminality, family violence, um, violent deaths, and prevention of violence. We're going to be talking specifically about violent deaths, and this is one of the elements that we're working very hard, and we're doing it daily in this office regarding validation. So this is the main source, which is the National Police, and it has a coverage of the entire territory of Honduras. It is divided into 18 departments and 218 municipalities. So the National Police has presence in the 18 areas and the 218 municipalities. So amongst the data that we take for the validation, we have the National Police, we have the Public Ministry, and we have the Registry of People, the Municipality Observatory of People, and of course, the Security of the Citizens Observatory. This process consists of having these institutions represented by their members and doing a review of each one of the cases of death that occur at a national level. Verify the death, verify if it was a violent death, what type of death it was, and the place, the person, the variables of the facts, check the ages, the gender, the type of the cause of the death, of course, the type of weapons, and of course, the final cause and the type of death. And the National Registry of People help us identify some cases where we don't have age or we can confirm the whole name of the person. And the Registry of Deaths is also something that we use. And talking about the security of citizens registry was created to help in the quality of the data and to create policies at a local level regarding this information. So the observatories also participate in the national field. So in general terms, this is the scheme that is used as part of the validation protocol for data. As you already know, we need to have quality statistics to be able to generate the public policies and to target the decision-making process. And in the case of the National Police, to orient the actions that are carried out in their activities. And of course, the National Police Department has their own statistics way of doing this. It's called the poll. And we have the registry of all the types of events or reports from the police and the deaths that the police receive. And of course, we have some data that need to be reviewed and verified. And this is why, in the case of the deaths, we verify what the National Police has together with the forensics department. And of course, it's complemented with the data of the processes of the National Registry of People. This is done every day from Tuesday to Friday. And then there are 2 or 3 tables gathered around with around 4 people in each table. And we do this process so that we are closer to our reality in terms of what happens in violent deaths. So this information that is done from the review and the validation of data is carried out focused in a protocol for the reconciliation of data, where we specify the work that is being done, the institutions that are participating in the process, depending on the table, if it's a criminality, if it's a violent death, if it's domestic violence, etc. And or if it's violence prevention. And based on that protocol that is carried out with all the institutions at the central level is what we do. Then for the observatories, the municipality observatories that work at a local level, they are coordinated as well by the Secretary of Security. And it's based on a protocol of the municipality observatories for the citizen security, and all the information regarding violence and criminality is uploaded into a portal. And this is denominated as an open, a portal of open data. So this is an integrated system for information for policies of citizen security. This has information of all the institutions that have signed this protocol of data reconciliation, and these are sources of information. So we can get the data there, and they are uploaded to this portal. What is this for? To give answer to the challenges that are shown to us as decision makers. And with different characteristics, we have interoperability between the different institutions. And as part of the efficient coordination, we analyze the multidimensional perspective that goes beyond the homicide, so that we can have other variables to characterize the coexistence and the citizen security in a wider way. So it also includes quality of information and the disaggregation of data at national, local, and regional levels, maybe going to the micro spaces, the neighborhoods, in a more detailed way. So this is why the portal of open data is a set of tools, and they are systematized in just one space. How is this created? Well, it is with the articulation with 7 government entities, and this information is put into just one platform that has public access and, well, with some of the tools, and other tools only are for the access of the decision makers. So we're going to listen to this video. This is an open data portal in terms of citizen security to offer transparency and access to public information. Access www.seguridaddatosabiertos.gov.nh and check the information from 2013 to 2023. We have sex, gender, and other areas of interest. Secretary of Security. So why is this useful? For the identification and classification of the territories according to the presence of threats and vulnerabilities, to focus the security policies at a local and a national level in those places where there are needs identified according to what the data is showing, and the decision-making process is going to be more effective. So this unified data in the portal has been used at a local and at a national level to be able to generate some actions. For example, the Ministry in Prevention, they use some of the tools to focalize the strategies targeted to prevention. It also is for accountability and for access to public information, and of course, to target all these concrete actions to vulnerable groups, marginated groups such as women, children, minor offenders, and other vulnerable groups. So the different systems and institutions that share data, these are the institutions that were mentioned before, and they provide data: the Ministry of Security, the police department against organized crime, the public ministry, the registry of people, the central information, the institution of statistics, and we have 15 different indicators. And which are the tools that we can use to identify? Well, we have an index of territory prioritization, and it's general. Then we have the prioritization index of school centers, and this is only for the decision makers. And we have the municipality situational analysis. This is public access, and the advanced analyzer, which show us a huge amount of variables to generate an analysis. And this is a dashboard that is going to help us cross this information to order the information according to the needs of the researcher or the decision maker or the analyst has. So here, the types of facts that we are having are crimes against life and integrity, crimes against property, and associated factors that affect coexistence and the citizens' security. We have homicide, sexual harassment or sexual crime, kidnap, domestic violence, intrafamily. Then we have extortion, robbery, and vehicle robbery, motorcycle robbery, and we have suicide, among others. So this database can provide information per political division, department, neighborhoods, towns, etc. We have population, we have time, place, person, and the information regarding the type of population, if it's men, women, if it's total population, children, kids, girls, boys, and depending on the disaggregation and depending on the age. We have 2 minutes left, thank you. And each one of these indexes are going to talk specifically about the different information. And now the advanced analyzer. This is one of the tools that allow the user to contribute dynamically to the reports in the graph or table forms and the different variables. And if we can analyze, for example, if we want to analyze the departments on Honduras, one of them is called Atlantida. This department can be disaggregated on each of these neighborhoods or municipalities, and we can see the typification of the 15 variables, and they can be characterized depending on the victim, of the ages, on the place, on the type of event, on historical facts, and it can be characterized as geographical area. It can allow us to cross this information, and this helps the decision-making process and the creation of the different policies. And the understanding that this effort is based on the SDG number 16 to promote fair societies, specific societies. We can go to the webpage seguridaddatosabiertos.gov.hn, and we can use this QR to go to this portal. And here we have the concentration of all the efforts or part of the efforts that are done in terms of the statistical use of data, police data, and the justice sector in the country. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, and I'm at your service. Thank you so much, Juan Carlos. We apologize because we were rushing you, but this was a fascinating presentation to see what you're doing, not only for the validation of data, but also how it's integrated and communicated. I think these cases have been very revealing in terms of how this information is generated, the collection process, the different variables that can be part of this process, and of course, the validation, integration, and communication or conveying of data in the justice system. Thank you so much for sharing these presentations. And now I would like to invite all the people here to ask your questions through the Q&A section. Please don't be shy. All your questions will be welcome. I'm sure they will be a valuable part of this conversation. And in the meantime, I would like to start with Lieutenant Colonel Mr. Sierra to ask a question when I was seeing his presentation. You were seeing all the elements in the management, and I think that we have Macri that talks about these networks or structures of criminality. Can you share a little bit about which are the variables that are integrated into this system, which are the elements that are merged there, or which are the elements that you're using to fill in the information of this data? I would like to know the variables because we can find good coincidences with the elements that were shown in the other presentations. Please, Lieutenant Colonel, if you could tell us about this, please.
Es uno de nuestros sistemas de
Yes,
información
it's one of our information systems that generates this dynamic in the planning and between the prosecutor's office and the national police, and this is hyper connected to the rest of the systems of the national police, and it generates some products to investigate together with the prosecutor's office, and the prosecutor's office is the owner of the data, and it's fed through all the judicial and legal processes that are done by the national police. So all the reports of the researchers of the field, of the elements that are done, the scaffolding is going to go to that database. But this database, well, the end or the objective is to manage to know who are the actors and the structures. So since it is interconnected, we have strategic maps that are coming from the police department, and they have a lot of details in terms of strategy. And of course, being able to identify the structure of where the crimes are being done and to identify how they're mutating to other parts of the country. In terms of the question that you're asking about the variables, well, everything that is related or everything that is used with the prosecutor's office. First, we are talking about the identification of which are the processes of the structures, who has these judicial investigations. For example, one of the strongest structures in criminal in transnational elements is the group of El Golfo. This is a structure with our classification of GAO, which is an armed, organized criminal group, and it has certain characteristics. So these characteristics go to the database. The database with the variables of the prosecutor's office can help us locate where are the processes and the actions and try to locate the prosecutor to say that there are 8 or 10 of them that have the same information so that we can gather these investigators together and we can have one same path with the information of the database. So variables, we have this interconnection of databases. So we would have around maybe 300 or 400 variables because it's an interconnection. But the functional variables are the ones that are going to help us locate the structures, have the location of which are the prosecutors that are investigating this information, and the units of the police that can exchange this information to make it one and make it in judicial matters. Thank you, Roberto. Thank you so much. I think that this is thinking about the future. I think that this is another topic that we will be talking about, the guidelines of the UNODC and this interconnection between the different institutions and the different types of users, right? Yes, and this takes me to the work that was mentioned from Honduras for the creation of the portal of open data. So Juan Carlos, maybe can we go to you? There's a question to you. I think it's related to this topic. You were mentioning the effort that is being done to have different sources of information so that they converge in just one portal, and it's showing information that it's already like facilitated for the audience. So we are having some contents of the advanced information, the disaggregations, or the information that it might contain. So can you share with us in terms of challenges and for the construction of this system to be able to show this disaggregated information, what is the thing that has been the hardest thing to get? I know there are some variables that are difficult to be registered, or maybe there's a moment that due to the nature of the information, you had some problems. What are the challenges that you have faced to build this database? Well, yes, actually, those are the most important challenges, like the biggest challenges, being able to have just one structure of the database, or maybe the way the institutions collect the information. The database that is best organized or best structured to be able to work with this portal is the database from the police source. Why? Because since 2013, they have been working on having a technological access to databases. So we can have access to the police reports and up to what happened yesterday. What happens today is being added today, so the system is updated. So what happens when we talk about the public ministry? This has the information in the system, but it's not in real time. It has a period of time, and they have the reports and they digitalize them. So the structure of the database has to be done like in different lines of work to be able to do a previous cleaning to this data to avoid errors at the moment of uploading the information to the system, and with the same codification and programming structure. So the biggest challenge has been in identifying this cleaning of databases and at the same time the access to the information and the feeding time of the data, because we would like to update or see the periodicity. We would like to update every month or every 2 months, but it depends on the availability of the data. So the data need to be complete so that we can upload them into the system. And one of the largest challenges is the availability and the recollection of information, or the scarcity of information regarding some variables that are needed to upload this information into the system, because it's not useful for us to just upload a number. Let's say 16,000 reports for domestic violence. We're not going to be able to work with that because we're not going to analyze with the specific disaggregations. So because this data is already published in the public ministry. But what is useful for us is the disaggregation of information that I was mentioning about the victims, the victim list. So we would like to add this information, but not just names, because we're not going to uh, make it easier for us. We need characterization, statistical characterization. But sometimes the report does not include that type of information, or the relationship that the person had with the offenders. So the way the institutions collect the information and the delays in the collection of information and the structure of the data is what makes this, or this is what creates the biggest inconveniences. So we know that the institutions are working on that, and due to the existence of this technical unit, of course they have demands to the institutions regarding the requests of the information and the organization of the information, and of course the institutions have had to improve in the collection. And in terms of public information access, well, we need to have that information. And there was a question that was asked on the chat that says, if we're thinking about adding information about narco activity and illegal drugs and its variables, and of course talking about the analysis and talking about being able to have this information, well, this is part of it. The creation of the portal, for example, for in 2017, this was one of the main ideas, to have information available and it would be public access for the analysis. and for the decision-making process. But the availability of information is what hasn't allowed us to update the data, and of course the sensibility of the information and the characteristics the information should have. These are other elements to consider. But we started with 15 indicators, and we are thinking about adding other types of information. For example, information of the judicial branch, or maybe some sentences. So adding other variables, including the narco activities, all the demographic information of Honduras, everything that we know about the activity of drugs in the country. So it's considered in those spaces so that we can have this information at some point when we are in compliance with the necessary requirements to upload this information. Thank you. I can see that there are some additional questions in the chat and in the QA section. So please continue asking questions. And there is another additional question that I think it's very important to have clarity on. And this is from Martine's presentation, specifically about the guidelines that were shown today. These guidelines have a set of dimensions to collect the information from the policy institutions. So Martine, can you share a little bit about this? I mean, some reflection on the implications for the policy departments regarding the publication of these guidelines. Which ones do you see are the challenges or the changes that can be triggered based on these guidelines?
Yeah, thank you, Roberto, for that question. Well, I have to first say that it's a very challenging process, and I've been very impressed by the two presenters that we've seen today. I can see that some countries are already very, very advanced in all of this. But I think the important challenge is for police, because we're talking specifically about the police in this instance, it's important to realize you're part of a larger system. So it is not just about collecting your data for your own sake. It is about collecting the data as well for the entire criminal justice sector, because it feeds into a better understanding, a more holistic understanding of the entire sector as a whole. And I think it's also very important to move from just collecting and analyzing crime data and crime patterns and crime trends to also using some of this, the potential of some of this administrative data to better understand how processes within the police are working. So how are we doing in terms of human resources, financial resources? Are we spending things in the most effective way? Expanding it to also looking at professional conduct of officers and how can we improve our interactions with citizens. All of this information it's much richer than just offense data. So using that data better to really improve operations and ultimately improve safety and security in society, of course, and improve your public service function that you have. And of course, it's also very important what we see is that sometimes within the criminal justice sector, some of the institutions, some of the four that I highlighted, are collecting a lot of very good information, but they are not necessarily doing a lot with it or not really publishing it. So as was just stressed by the presenter from Honduras as well, I do think it's very important to switch to more of an open data policy as well, to make the data available outside of your institution, so that also the National Statistical Office can have a look at them, the Ministry of Justice, but also research institutes. I think that can really help the sector develop more evidence-based policies and yeah, improve operations. I don't have the ultimate answer, but that is some of the things that would come to mind for me.
Muchísimas gracias, Martine.
Thank you so much, Martine. And since we are running out of time, I'm going to mix a little bit the questions that we have seen both in the Q&A and the chat. A last question that I would like to ask to the three panelists is, please try to answer this in 30 seconds, if it's possible, maximum 1 minute. But it's related to the use of the statistical information from the police department to be able to generate early alerts to be able to prevent effectively, even previous to escalation of violence of any type. We have attacks, internal displacements, gender violence. So I don't know if you could tell us a little bit about this, a few seconds about the potential that the statistics have, the police statistics have, to be able to generate early alerts and to have early prevention. I'm going to give the floor to the Lieutenant Colonel first. Well, for us, statistics are vital. Quantitatively, they're vital, and their collection is vital. The treatment is vital. So we have to match it with all the technological alternatives that we already have to be able to match all this information hyper connected with other databases, as we've seen with the speakers, with the questions, to improve the quality of the data, and with the tools that the world has available for us in terms of public and private matters, plus the internal development with our engineers, with our police departments based on needs, then we can have a lot of things flourish in terms of descriptive analysis, predictive analysis, cognitive analysis. For example, in Colombia, this has been very important to have our predictive model, which is about to be launched, and this is going to be working together with the operational, strategic, and decision-making processes, and I think that would be our answer. Thank you so much. I appreciate that you have answered so quickly. Juan Carlos, would you like to answer something else to this topic? Yes, in the case of what has been done from the National Police and the statistical elements, the importance of the use of data is established in a situation that has been seen in Honduras, and the use of these statistical data, and what the police has used is the statistical information in real time with the access that we have to the system. And this is something that is used not only for the different strategies at the national level, but it's used also at the local level, because this is the first source of information. And let me just give you an example. There are some members that are here present, and there has been some inconsistencies in the variables in the preliminary registry, for example. So we started already working with the generation of some processes to empower and to train in some variables, and we're doing this at the national level because this is the instruction from the Ministry of Security and the director of the police department, so that we can give a better quality to this data. So we are already working from the validation of data so that the first respondent level, at the level of the collection of data from the National Police, at that point, we're going to have the correction of the errors. And these are the ones that are used for the decision-making process. If there are errors, then the decision-making process is also going to have errors. So we are working very hard on these data. Thank you so much, Martin. We are running out of time. We just have a couple of seconds. You have the floor.
Yes, very briefly, I think collecting more and higher quality administrative data is crucial to better understand these phenomena. And if you can better understand the phenomena, you are, of course, better able to prevent them, also by by designing better policies. I will say that the guidelines don't necessarily focus on predictive policing, etc. It really focuses on getting the basics right, collecting the basic information, because in a lot of countries that is the problem. You know, you can't just skip ahead and immediately have predictive models and highly advanced things. It's really about getting that basic right, the base right, and once you collect all of this information and ensure the quality, etc., as just also highlighted by the previous speaker, then you can start thinking about taking the next step and moving to predictive models, etc. But yeah, the guidelines really focus on that creating that basis and ensuring that you're collecting the right information.
Muchísimas gracias. Creo que ese es un muy buen punto de partida. a partir del
Thank you
cual
so much. That is a great starting point where we can start building these elements and we can generate models to have a more proactive prevention. Thank you so much for the ones who are joining us today in this webinar. I would only like to give a final message. First of all, thank you so much for the time that you gave us here. Secondly, an apology because we weren't able to answer all the questions on the chat, but we are recording them so that we can add them into the information of our next webinars. And this is precisely what I would like to mention. If you are registered here, you should have in your calendars these next webinars. The next days we will be working on November 15th, registration information systems of the police department and use and analysis of police information. So if it's not scheduled on your calendars, please register again so that you have an automatic notification. And finally, once more, I'm going to give you the QR code so that you can download the guidelines that were part of this conversation, and we will be analyzing them with you in the future. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope that you enjoyed it and it was of your interest, and we'll see again in 15 days. Thank you so much.